She woke up before the alarm. Her body did that now, waking itself, as if it no longer trusted rest to come back on its own. The room was quiet in a fragile way. Not peaceful. Just holding its breath. The kind of silence that made every small movement feel louder than it should be. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the blanket on her legs. It was thin. Always cold in the mornings. She didn't pull it higher. Cold kept her alert. Her phone rested near her hand. Face down. She didn't turn it over. Hope was heavier than disappointment. When she finally sat up, her back protested softly. A dull ache she carried with her like an old companion. She rolled her shoulders once, slowly, letting the tension spread before it loosened. In the bathroom, the water was cold. She splashed her face and let it run down her wrists, watching it disappear into the drain. For a second longer than necessary. It grounded her. Reminded her she was here. Awake. Needed. She met her reflection briefly. Not to judge it. Just to confirm it was still hers. Her hair went up. Clothes followed. Soft, neutral fabrics. Nothing that clung. Nothing that invited attention. She chose comfort over beauty without thinking, as if that decision had already been made for her long ago. Outside, the city brushed past her. Warm air. Exhaust. Someone's perfume drifting too sweet from a passing couple. She adjusted the strap of her bag, tightening it against her shoulder like an instinct. On the bus, she stood even when a seat opened up. Standing kept her balanced. Standing meant she didn't owe anyone eye contact, conversation, or explanation. She watched the city slide by through the window, glass separating her from a life she wasn't sure how to enter. At work, the building felt cooler. Controlled. Predictable. She stepped into her uniform and felt herself recede. Not disappear, just soften around the edges. Hands moved. Tasks repeated. Her body learned the rhythm faster than her mind ever could. She listened more than she spoke. Nodded when spoken to. Memorized instructions the way others memorized names. Her stomach tightened by midday. She ate quickly, standing near the back, chewing without tasting. Her phone buzzed in her palm. Did you sleep well? Her mother always asked the wrong question. She typed yes anyway. Then she sent money. Money was easier than honesty. The afternoon stretched thin. Her feet ached. Her thoughts slowed. She caught herself leaning against a counter for half a second too long before straightening again. She didn't want to be noticed. When her shift ended, she felt lighter, not relieved, just unheld. Outside, the sun reflected off glass towers, bright enough to make her squint. The warmth touched her face, brief and careless, like it didn't know her schedule. On the bus ride home, she finally sat. Her shoulder rested against the window. The vibration hummed through her bones. Her eyelids lowered. Not asleep, just open enough for memory to slip in. The smell of home-cooked food. A voice calling her name without urgency. Bare feet on a familiar floor. She inhaled sharply and opened her eyes. The bus jolted forward. At home, she cooked slowly this time. Rice steaming. Vegetables sizzling softly. The sound filled the room, keeping her company. She ate alone at the small table, legs tucked beneath her, savoring warmth more than flavor. Later, she lay in bed with the light off. This was when thoughts got too close. She traced the seam of the blanket with her fingers. Listened to distant traffic. Someone upstairs laughed. Someone downstairs argued. Life, happening loudly, without asking her to join. She wasn't lonely. Loneliness meant desire. What she felt was quieter. Heavier. A kind of waiting she couldn't name. Her phone remained silent. She turned onto her side and closed her eyes. Just one more day, she told herself. Just get through tomorrow. For a long time, that promise had been enough. She didn't know yet that something had already begun to notice her. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to change the way tomorrow would feel. Sleep didn't come right away. It never did. She lay still, listening to her own breathing, counting it without meaning to. In. Out. Slow enough to calm the ache in her chest that arrived every night without invitation. Her mind drifted back to the day in fragments. The weight of her bag against her shoulder. The sound of her name spoken without warmth. The way she instinctively stepped aside to make space for others, even when no one asked her to. She wondered when that had started. Making herself smaller. Not physically, but emotionally. Like a habit learned quietly, reinforced daily, until it felt safer than standing fully present. She rolled onto her back and stared at the ceiling again. A faint crack ran across it, like a line drawn by time itself. She'd noticed it months ago and never thought to fix it. Temporary things didn't get repaired. Her phone vibrated softly. Not a message. Just a notification from the bank confirming the transfer she'd made earlier. She closed her eyes. Somewhere, someone she loved would wake up a little less worried tomorrow. That thought warmed her chest in a way nothing else did. It was enough. It had to be. She reached for the glass of water on her bedside table, fingers brushing the cool surface. The sensation grounded her again. Real. Present. Alone. Outside, a car passed slowly. Tires against wet pavement. The sound lingered, then faded. She imagined what it might feel like to live without calculating every step. Without rehearsing every interaction in her head before it happened. Without measuring worth in hours worked and money sent. The thought felt dangerous. Dreams required energy she didn't have. She turned onto her side again, pulling the blanket closer this time. Not for warmth, but for pressure. For the reminder that something, at least, was holding her. Tomorrow would be the same. The routine. The silence. The careful distance. And yet, for reasons she couldn't explain, she sensed a thin crack forming in the rhythm of her days. Not a break. Just a pause. A hesitation in the endless repetition. As if the world had briefly slowed, not for everyone. Just for her. She exhaled, long and quiet, and finally let her body sink into the mattress. Unaware that invisibility, once noticed, never stays invisible for long. The first time it happened, she didn't realize it mattered. It was small. Almost nothing. She was walking down the corridor, arms full, eyes fixed on the floor like always. The building hummed around her, conversations, footsteps, the distant sound of phones ringing. She stepped aside out of habit. And then she didn't need to. Someone else moved first. She slowed without meaning to, the shift so subtle she wondered if she'd imagined it. When she looked up, their eyes met for half a second. Just long enough for awareness to register, and then pass. No smile. No comment. No interruption. The moment dissolved as quickly as it formed. She told herself it meant nothing. But later, as she worked, she noticed her shoulders weren't as tight. The second time, it was the elevator. She stood near the back, hands folded, eyes tracing the glowing numbers above the door. The space was quiet, shared by people who didn't speak. She could feel the weight of other bodies, the faint warmth of proximity. The doors slid open at one floor. Someone entered. She sensed the pause before she saw it. Not hesitation. Consideration. He waited for her to step out first. She didn't rush. She didn't nod. She simply walked past. Her heartbeat felt louder than it should have. She didn't look back. For the rest of the day, she moved differently. Not faster. Not slower. Just, more aware of herself in space. The third time, she heard her name. Spoken clearly. correctly. She turned, confused, expecting a correction, a task, something she'd missed. Instead, there was only a brief exchange. A confirmation. A nod. Nothing personal. And yet her name lingered in her mind long after the sound disappeared. At lunch, she ate slower. She found herself watching people instead of avoiding them. Not out of curiosity, but out of quiet disbelief. As if the world had shifted slightly and no one had announced it. She told herself not to assign meaning. Meaning led to expectations. Expectations led to disappointment. Still, something had changed. In the days that followed, the moments repeated. Never dramatic. Never public. Always brief. A held door. A pause in conversation. A glance that acknowledged her presence without examining it. She never caught him watching her. That wasn't the point. What unsettled her was the absence of dismissal. She wasn't being assessed. Or evaluated. Or ignored. She was simply included. At home, the change followed her. She slept a little deeper. Cooked with music on. Left the lights on longer than usual. Small rebellions against the invisible rules she'd lived by. She noticed herself checking her appearance in the mirror before work, not to impress, but to confirm reality. She was still herself. And yet, something about being seen had altered the shape of her days. She felt it most in silence. In moments when nothing happened, and she realized she wasn't bracing for impact. One evening, as she left the building, the lobby felt different. Brighter. Not because of the lights, but because she was aware of the space she occupied within it. She walked past the glass doors and felt a presence beside her. Not close enough to touch. Not far enough to ignore. They moved at the same pace for a few steps before parting naturally, without words. She didn't look over. She didn't need to. For the first time since she'd arrived in this country, she felt something unfamiliar settle into her chest. Not hope. Hope was dangerous. This was quieter. A sense of legitimacy. As if her existence, unremarkable and unnoticed for so long, had finally registered on someone else's map of the world. She went home that night unsettled. Not afraid. Just aware. An awareness, she would later learn, was never neutral. The call came in the middle of the afternoon. Not dramatic. Not urgent enough to draw attention. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket, soft against her thigh. She ignored it at first. Personal calls during work hours were never good news, and good news never needed to hurry. The vibration came again. She stepped aside, pretending to check something on her phone, and read the message quickly. "We need to talk later. It's about your father." Her hands went cold. The rest of the shift passed in fragments. She completed tasks on instinct, her body moving while her thoughts stayed somewhere else entirely. The room felt louder. Brighter. Less forgiving. By the time she clocked out, her jaw ached from clenching it. She called home from outside the building, standing near the edge of the sidewalk where people passed without noticing her. Her mother's voice sounded smaller than usual. Not panicked. Just tired. There had been an accident. Nothing sudden. Nothing cinematic. Just the slow accumulation of strain. A hospital stay. Tests. Time off work. Bills that didn't wait for recovery. Her mother spoke carefully, as if choosing words that wouldn't collapse under their own weight. They needed help. Not everything. Just a little. She listened without interrupting, staring at the reflection of the building across the street. Glass and steel, standing effortlessly tall. When the call ended, she didn't cry. Crying required space. She stayed where she was, phone still in her hand, feeling the city press in around her. For the first time since she'd arrived here, the distance between two worlds felt impossible to measure. That night, she didn't cook. She sat on the edge of her bed, paperwork spread out beside her. Numbers. Dates. Amounts. None of them added up the way she needed them to. She had savings, barely. Enough for emergencies. Enough to pretend she was safe. This wasn't an emergency. This was a slow burn. The next day, she moved through work like someone underwater. Sounds reached her late. Instructions echoed longer than usual. She caught herself rereading the same note twice. She didn't notice him approach. That was the strange part. He stopped a few steps away, far enough to respect space, close enough to register presence. He spoke her name once. Not loudly. Not softly. Just correctly. She looked up, startled. There was no concern on his face. No impatience. Just a neutral question about something she was handling, routine, ordinary, unimportant. She answered, aware of her own breathing. Before he left, he paused. "You seem distracted," he said. Not as an accusation. More like an observation. She nodded once. "I'm fine." He didn't challenge it. Instead, he said, "If you need time, take it." Then he walked away. That was all. No questions. No follow-up. No promises. And yet, the words stayed with her longer than they should have. Later that afternoon, she found a note waiting for her. Clear instructions. A schedule adjustment. Nothing dramatic, just enough to create room where there had been none. She stared at it longer than necessary. This kind of help came with expectations. Or it didn't come at all. She debated for hours whether to acknowledge it. Whether to say thank you. Whether saying nothing was safer. In the end, she did nothing. And no one corrected her. That evening, she called home again. Her mother sounded relieved, though nothing had changed yet. Relief, she realized, didn't require solutions, just the belief that one might exist. Over the next few days, small things shifted. Her workload lightened, subtly. She was given time instead of tasks. Space instead of scrutiny. No one announced it. No one explained it. He never mentioned it again. That unsettled her more than gratitude would have. One afternoon, she found herself standing outside his office, envelope in hand. Papers she didn't know how to fill out alone. Questions she hadn't learned how to ask. She hesitated. This was where things crossed lines. She knocked anyway. He listened without interrupting. Didn't sit. Didn't invite her to explain everything. Just read the documents, nodded once, and handed them back with a simple note written in the margin. "Submit these," he said. "It should help." She waited for the rest of the sentence. There wasn't one. "No obligation," he added, almost as an afterthought. That was worse. Obligations were easier to repay than kindness with no shape. As she left, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of something unnamed settling between them. At home that night, she lay awake longer than usual. She wasn't imagining a future. She was calculating a present that felt suddenly unstable. Help had arrived. Quietly. Carefully. Without asking anything in return. And she knew, with a certainty that scared her, that accepting it would change something she might not be able to undo. Nothing changed all at once. That was the strange part. There was no single morning where she woke up and realized her life was different. No moment she could point to and say, "This is where it turned." Instead, the days softened around the edges, quietly, almost politely. She started sleeping through the night. Not deeply, but without waking every few hours to check the time, to calculate how much rest she could afford. Her body loosened its grip on vigilance, just enough to breathe. In the mornings, she stopped rushing. She still woke early, but the urgency had faded. She let the water run warmer in the shower. Stayed under it a few seconds longer. Felt it slide down her back, over shoulders that no longer stayed permanently tight. At work, her days unfolded with less resistance. Tasks arrived with clarity instead of pressure. Schedules held. Corrections came gently, when they came at all. No one hovered. No one tested her limits just to see where they were. She didn't ask why. Asking would mean acknowledging the change, and acknowledgement felt like risk. Lunch became something she noticed again. She sat down sometimes. Took her time. Watched people move through the room, listening to conversations without feeling like an intruder. She found herself smiling at nothing, then quickly stopping, unsure who the smile was meant for. He remained, consistent. Not present in a way that drew attention. Not absent in a way that felt dismissive. Just there, steady, predictable, contained. When they crossed paths, it was brief. A nod. A shared silence. An unspoken understanding that neither of them would turn this into something it wasn't. And yet, his presence recalibrated the room. Meetings felt calmer when he was there. Decisions landed with less friction. People listened more carefully, not out of fear, but respect. She noticed these things the way one notices weather patterns. Not consciously. Just enough to adjust behavior. At home, the changes became more obvious. She started cooking meals that required patience. Stirring. Waiting. Letting flavors build. She put music on while she cooked, low, instrumental, something that filled the silence without demanding attention. She called home more often. Not with updates. Just to listen. Her father sounded stronger some days. Tired on others. The uncertainty remained, but it no longer felt like it was pressing directly against her chest. Money still mattered. But it wasn't the only thing holding her family together now. That realization unsettled her more than it should have. On weekends, she walked instead of taking the bus. She let the city reveal itself at a human pace, shop windows, parks tucked between buildings, couples arguing softly over coffee. She existed among them without shrinking. She wasn't pretending to belong. She just didn't feel excluded. One afternoon, she ran into him outside the building. Not planned. Not staged. They exited at the same time, the doors sliding shut behind them. For a moment, neither of them moved. The city noise rushed in, loud and impatient. He adjusted his jacket. She tightened her grip on her bag. They walked in the same direction without discussing it. For a block. Then two. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was neutral. Spacious. A shared agreement not to fill it with things that didn't need saying. At the corner, he stopped. She did too, instinctively. "You don't need to hurry," he said, gesturing lightly toward the crosswalk. "The light takes a while." She nodded. They waited. People passed around them, absorbed in their own lives. No one paid attention. No one needed to. The light changed. He stepped back, letting her go first. She crossed the street with a strange awareness in her body, of posture, of breath, of the ground beneath her feet. On the other side, she didn't turn around. She didn't need to. That night, she lay in bed longer before sleeping. Not restless. Just reflective. She traced the familiar crack in the ceiling and realized she no longer saw it as a sign of impermanence. It was just there. Like everything else. She began to imagine a future measured not in escape plans, but in routines. Not dreams. Routines. Stability. That was the illusion. Because illusions don't announce themselves. They feel earned. Weeks passed. Her life settled into a rhythm so gentle she forgot it was new. She stopped bracing for collapse. Stopped rehearsing worst-case scenarios before bed. She even stopped counting days. And that was when she made her first mistake. She allowed herself to believe that this version of her life, calm, contained, quietly supported, might last. That nothing would demand payment. That help could exist without consequence. She didn't see the tension building elsewhere. Didn't hear the conversations happening beyond her reach. Didn't know that stability, once noticed, attracts attention, not all of it kind. The illusion held. Perfectly. Right up until it didn't. The days continued to stack gently on top of one another. She stopped marking time by events and started measuring it by feelings. How heavy her body felt in the mornings. How quickly the evening arrived. How often she noticed herself breathing without thinking about it. Comfort crept in quietly. She rearranged her apartment one Saturday afternoon. Not a full reorganization, just small changes. The chair moved closer to the window. The table cleared of things she no longer needed to see every day. She opened the curtains wider and let the city watch her back for once. Sunlight filled the room in a way it never had before. She stood there for a moment, unsure why the sight unsettled her. She bought groceries without calculating every item. Not recklessly. Just, normally. At the checkout, she didn't rush. She didn't apologize when her card took an extra second to process. She met the cashier's eyes and nodded, a small acknowledgement of shared existence. It felt unfamiliar. At work, people began to include her in conversations that didn't require her input. Comments about weather. About traffic. About nothing at all. She listened more than she spoke, but the difference was subtle and profound. No one spoke around her anymore. They spoke with her nearby. She started to leave her phone on her desk. Not face down. Not hidden. Just there. Sometimes she caught herself glancing toward his office, not searching, just aware. As if knowing where something was located made the space feel safer. They spoke rarely. When they did, it remained practical. Measured. Almost deliberately unremarkable. Yet the absence of tension between them felt like its own presence. He never asked about her family again. That, too, was a kindness. One evening, she stayed late without realizing it. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to finish what she was doing. The building emptied slowly around her. Lights dimmed. Sounds softened. She stepped outside later than usual and felt the cool air against her skin, sharper now as seasons shifted. He was there. Not waiting. Just leaving. Their paths aligned for a moment before diverging naturally. No acknowledgement beyond a glance. No need to slow down. The city absorbed them separately. At home, she noticed her dreams changing. They were no longer about escape. No frantic running. No locked doors. No endless searching. Instead, they were ordinary. Conversations. Kitchens. Open windows. She woke from them not with relief, but with confusion. As if her mind was practicing for a life she hadn't agreed to yet. She started making plans that extended beyond necessity. A dentist appointment. A day off months away. A replacement for the broken kettle instead of working around it. Commitments implied continuity. She didn't stop herself. On a call with her mother, she laughed. It surprised them both. Her mother paused, then said softly, "You sound settled." The word landed heavier than she expected. Settled meant rooted. Rooted meant visible. Visible meant vulnerable. She changed the subject. But the thought stayed. The illusion deepened not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was threatening it. And that was the most dangerous kind of peace. She no longer rehearsed explanations in her head before speaking. No longer mapped exits when entering rooms. No longer flinched when her name was called. Her body had learned a new default. Safety. What she didn't realize was that safety, once established, becomes noticeable. Not just to the person experiencing it, but to those who measure environments by control, hierarchy, and boundaries. She didn't see the looks exchanged behind closed doors. Didn't hear her name spoken in contexts she wasn't invited into. Didn't know that help, however quiet, always leaves a trail. And trails, eventually, get followed. The illusion didn't crack yet. It settled deeper. Warm. Convincing. Complete. By the time the first sign appeared, subtle, almost polite, she had already forgotten what life felt like without this softness wrapped around her days. And forgetting, she would soon learn, carried its own cost. The message arrived early in the morning. Not from work. From her sister. We got the visa dates. Dad wants to come. Mom too. She read it twice, standing in the kitchen, kettle boiling behind her until the sound grew sharp enough to demand attention. She turned it off and stared at the counter, calculating timelines she hadn't planned for. Her family had never seen where she worked. She had never invited them. Not because she was ashamed, but because the distance between their lives and hers was easier to manage when it stayed abstract. At work, the timing couldn't have been worse. That week, the building felt tighter. Meetings ran longer. Decisions were scrutinized more closely. She noticed her name appearing in emails it had never appeared in before, not highlighted, just present. Visible. She mentioned her family's visit to her supervisor in passing. Framed it casually. As information, not a request. The response was polite. Neutral. We'll make sure everything's appropriate. Appropriate for whom, she didn't ask. Her family arrived on a Tuesday. Her father moved slowly now, leaning on her arm as they crossed the lobby. The building swallowed them whole, glass, stone, quiet efficiency. Her mother walked half a step behind, eyes lifting and dropping, absorbing rules no one had explained. Her sister whispered questions that echoed too loudly. She felt exposed. At her desk, she tried to work while they waited nearby. Every movement felt observed. Every sound amplified. People passed, curious but controlled. Then he appeared. Not suddenly. Not announced. He approached the group with the same measured pace he always had. Introduced himself simply. Her family stiffened. Her mother stood straighter. Her father extended a hand too eagerly. Gratitude rushed forward before anyone could stop it. Thank you, her mother said. For helping her. For everything. The words landed harder than any accusation. He responded calmly. Redirected the conversation. Clarified boundaries without stating them. There's no need for that, he said. She's very capable. Capable. The word changed the temperature of the room. Because it framed the help as unnecessary, and therefore inappropriate. After he left, silence followed. Her sister finally asked what no one else would. Is he your boss? She hesitated. Yes, she said. The visit lasted 2 days. During that time, she noticed the shift crystallize. Meetings she usually attended were rescheduled. Tasks were reassigned. Instructions became formal, documented, unmistakable. No punishment. Just distance. Professional distance. On the second afternoon, she was asked to meet with management. They spoke about optics. About boundaries. About maintaining clarity in professional relationships. No one raised their voice. No one accused her of anything. But the message was clear. Help had crossed into visibility. And visibility required correction. That evening, she walked her family back to the apartment. Her father sat heavily on the chair. Her mother busied herself with unnecessary cleaning. Her sister avoided her eyes. You don't need to do this for us, her father said quietly. She didn't answer. The next morning, after they left, she returned to work alone. The building felt colder. She saw him once, across the floor, in conversation with people who didn't look her way. There was no moment. No exchange. That, she realized, was the point. The help had not been revoked. It had been neutralized. She finished the day with a clarity she hadn't had before. Nothing had been taken from her. But everything now had a price. And for the first time, she understood that the choice ahead wasn't about love, or gratitude, or survival. It was about position. And whether she was willing to stay where she had been quietly placed. She didn't make the decision right away. That was the first thing she noticed. There was no dramatic moment. No sleepless night filled with tears. No sudden clarity at dawn. Just days passing. Work continued, cleaner now. Sharper. Everything placed back into clear lines. Her tasks came with expectations instead of consideration. Feedback was timely. Neutral. Professional. She performed well. Better, even. Because excellence was safer than interpretation. At home, her apartment felt quieter than before. Not empty, just stripped of the softness she had allowed herself to believe in. She returned to habits she hadn't noticed she'd abandoned. Planning meals. Tracking expenses. Checking messages twice before sending. The illusion had dissolved without resistance. One evening, she stayed late again. This time, she knew why. He was still there when she left her desk. In his office, lights dimmed, speaking to someone on the phone. He glanced up, noticed her, and nodded once. Not an invitation. Not a dismissal. Just acknowledgement. They shared the elevator down. Silence sat between them, heavier now because it was intentional. At the lobby, he spoke first. "I hope your family arrived home safely." She nodded. They did. Another pause. Then, something different. "I should have handled that better," he said. Not apologetic. Honest. She met his eyes. "You handled it exactly how you needed to," she replied. The doors opened. They stepped out into separate directions, then stopped. Not because of impulse, but because both understood this was the only moment it would ever make sense to speak plainly. "I can't help you anymore," he said. "I know. And I won't pretend I don't see you. I wouldn't ask you to." The truth settled cleanly between them. No drama. No promise. No regret loud enough to perform. Just alignment. She resigned 3 weeks later. Not impulsively. Not angrily. She accepted an offer elsewhere, smaller company, lower visibility, fewer assumptions. A place where her competence would be enough without explanation. On her last day, she cleared her desk quietly. He didn't come to say goodbye. She hadn't expected him to. As she stepped outside, the city felt the same, loud, indifferent, alive. But she felt different within it. Not rescued. Not elevated. Chosen. Not by him, but by herself. Later, much later, she would realize something important. Love had not been the point. Neither had power. What mattered was that for a brief moment, someone had seen her without reducing her to where she came from, and then stepped back when seeing her became dangerous. That, she understood now, was not betrayal. It was respect. She walked forward without looking back. Not because it didn't matter. But because it finally did, in the right way. If this story stayed with you longer than you expected, you're not alone. Some stories don't end loudly. They end quietly, the kind that makes you think about choices you didn't make, and the ones you did. If you listen to stories like this often, you might want to stay here. There are more coming.